Welcome to the Jboy Show, hosted by Jake Crain, the fastest growing sports show in the nation.
I'm Coach Hugh Freeze.
This is Super Bowl champion Brandon Graham.
Hey, this is DJ Shockley, and you're watching.
And thanks for watching the Jboy Show.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for choosing the Jboy Show. Excited to bring you another great episode this morning. Talking some SEC and specifically some SEC quarterbacks. Going to hit some NFL draft as well, and kind of take a look around the league with one of the best to do it. But before we get to him, I want to give a shout out to BetOnline.ag, one of our favorite partners. The online casino is always open. They've got unbelievable signing up bonuses. If you don't know where to go to place your bets, if you can bet and still feel good about it, you need to go to betonline.ag right now and sign up, whether it's Major League Baseball, NASCAR, golf, Quidditch. If they're playing it, they're going to have a spread on it. Head over to betonline.ag today and tell them that Jboy sent you. All right, let's get on to the show. Very excited to welcome sideline analyst for ESPN. Look, you're going to know this guy. I can give him whatever introduction. Great football mind, guy that really understands the game, not only from a schematical standpoint, but from a scouting standpoint, which is huge, especially in the time period that we're in. And that's Mr. Tom Luginbill. Tom, man, I really appreciate you coming on, brother. Love your work.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. And I want to jump right into it. And I want to talk about the draft a little bit at the end. It's still on people's minds. But we get through spring practice, actually had a spring practice. We both know how important that is for development of not only the team, but for the quarterbacks. And if you look, it's such a crazy, because I look at the hot seat and quarterbacks kind of in the same realm going into the year. And one thing I've talked about, with basically every SEC guy we've had on here, college football guys, Tom, when's the last time that we've gone into a season in the SEC? And I guess you can maybe say Ed Orgeron, nobody's on the hot seat, man. There's not one coach really that you're like, well, he better have a good year. I guess you could say Ed O. I still think unless it's a disaster, he'll get another year. But it's wild to see that from a storyline standpoint to me, Tom, before we get to the quarterbacks.
Well, and I also think it's a reflection of the health of the league top to bottom. The programs are stabilized. Kentucky's it's in better shape than it's ever been.
Yeah.
You've seen renewed enthusiasm in Gainesville at Florida under Dan Mullen. Obviously, they look like they fixed the quarterback position, at least in the interim, at the University of Georgia. And so, listen, you got some fresh blood too. We got Brian Harsin at Auburn. You've got Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Really, the biggest question for me as far as coaching stability and hot seat is the Mississippi State rebound. I mean, that was an abysmal football team a year ago, coming off of what has been a really good 11 years in Starkville. But yeah, I think the programs, Sam Pittman has done a remarkable job in a short period of time at Arkansas. The programs are in good hands right now.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at the depth of the league and you look at Arkansas, who's kind of on the rise with Sam Pittman. Again, they've got a long way to go from a roster standpoint. You bring up Mississippi State, but I want to move to the quarterback position, Tom, because I know this is something you do a really good job of evaluating. And before we get there, what are some things that you look for when you're scouting a quarterback? What are some superlatives? I'm not talking about, can he run, pass, but really just 2 or 3 things that you look at that a quarterback has to have to be able to operate.
There's a few. I would start off with what I call AAA. Okay. That is accuracy, aptitude, and athleticism. I think those 3 things are key. And then I would probably add 2 other factors that I don't think you could be successful under center if you don't have these 2, and that is mental toughness and a competitive temperament. Those 2 things, along with the AAA, for me, are so important. We've gone from everybody feeling like you have to have some prototypical guy. You got to be 6'4", 215, rocket arm, and you need to be able to make this throw and do this and do that. And now what we've done is scheme, and the advancement of how the game is played has opened the door for the 5'11", 6-foot guy that has attributes. He's got, let's just say some physical traits that are maybe above adequate, or let's just say they're even elite. So now all of a sudden, you look at a Russell Wilson or a Drew Brees and you don't care that they're not 6'3", 215. You're looking at the end result. You're looking at how does this player process information? Does this player respond to adversity? How competitive is he? Can he take shots? Is he mentally and physically tough? And oftentimes at the quarterback position, so many of those things that I just referenced have very little to do with physical skill. There's, and I get this in recruiting all the time. People will sit there and say, well, why isn't this guy getting recruited? He's thrown for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. Well, I've seen that a lot. I can see it everywhere at the high school level. That doesn't mean that kid has a supreme skill set or some of the other things that we've mentioned. The same way in college football, you can look at guys that have remarkable statistical successes. I could look at a string of Texas Tech quarterbacks for a lot of years. None of them have played in the NFL. So there's more than just statistics that go into it. There's more than just physical measurables. So many of the intangible attributes, I think, are probably more critical than they ever were before.
I agree with you. And when the bullets are flying out there, you got to have a guy that, like you said, has temperament. And AAA, man, I like that. They can fix your car and your quarterback room, coming from Tom Luginbill. That's pretty nice there. I'm going to have to use that down the road. But, when you're looking at the quarterbacks this year in the SEC, and I've released my rankings, have them here on the paper next to me. And it's hard not to put JT Daniels one, because when I look at it, Tom, it's not just how good is the quarterback, it's what is around him. And you look at a guy like Ken Seals from Vanderbilt, really talented. If you put Ken Seals at Georgia, I probably have him almost as highly ranked as JT Daniels, because I think his skill set's really good, but he doesn't have those weapons at Vanderbilt. Is JT Daniels kind of number one for you in the lead right now in the SEC quarterback race? Because look, we know it's preseason, whatever, but it's hard not to put him one for me with the weapons. And I love Matt Luke as an offensive line coach as well.
Yeah, I would actually disagree with you. I would put Matt Corral number one.
I don't think you're crazy. Don't think
he'd be number one actually by a long shot for me.
Really?
I think when it's all said and done at the end of this coming fall, barring an unforeseen circumstance or an injury, there will be discussions about him in the same manner that we discussed Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. You'll hear the Patrick Mahomes references. I think he's special. Here's my take on JT Daniels. I think JT Daniels brings competency to the position for Georgia. If you watch Georgia prior to him seeing the field last year, they were absolutely incompetent under center, could not function, right? So what do teams do? They're not worried about having to defend the passing game. So they load up the box and they stop the run. And now all of a sudden Georgia is very average at best on offense. You bring competency to the position, because I don't know if JT Daniels, at least in my mind, is an elite physical talent. I think he's more in the realm of a Matt Barkley, a Jake Fromm, a guy that is talented, but maybe doesn't have this high ceiling where you're looking at him and saying, wow, 3-4 years from now, he's going to be a totally different guy. I think much like Matt Barkley and much like Jake Fromm, when they came out of high school, they were kind of the exact same guy 4 years later. Yeah. And I look at JT being more in that realm. But to your point, I also felt at the end of last year that Georgia was, without question, with JT Daniels at quarterback, one of the top 4 teams in college football. They were a better football team than Notre Dame. But it was too little, because obviously how they performed when they didn't have steady quarterback play killed them early on. But there's going to be some exciting new faces across the league at quarterback, whether it's Luke Doty maybe at South Carolina, whether it's Emory Jones at Florida. Heck, LSU's got 4 legitimate candidates. For my money, it's Matt Corral. Now, I don't know if Ole Miss is far enough along on defense to truly contend in the West, but they're going to put people in a position to have to score at least 35 or 40 to beat them.
Yeah, and look, I'm with you. I got Matt Corral as number 2 here, and the biggest reason I have him at number 2, because I think he can do more things than JT Daniels can.
Way more.
JT Daniels can, especially with his legs. He gets some credit for his athleticism, but I don't think he gets enough. Extending the play, does a really good job. My biggest thing on him is we all know how good Elijah Moore was last year, kind of security blanket. Kenny Yeboah. I love Braylon Sanders. I think Braylon Sanders is going to take that mantle over. I like Mingo. I just don't know, because I thought their offensive line as well played really well last year, and then all of a sudden their offensive line coach just got let go. And to me, it's just really weird timing. I think you'll agree with me. Right after the spring, you typically don't see that at an importance of the offensive line coach. And I'm not 100% sure why that happened. I just find it very interesting. So I think that 1 to 2, I think there is some questions, but I really like Todd Monken as well, Georgia's OC. I think Kirby's going to give him a little more leash. And I think JT, and I've talked about this with some of the Georgia guys I've had on here, has earned a little more of a leash from Kirby, because Kirby has to evolve that offense. Because you're right, Ole Miss is going to score. Now, I'm with you. I don't think they have the personnel yet it's funny watching some of the guys that started last year run with that second team on defense in the spring, kind of lets you know how bad they were last year. Well, not bad, but just how depleted they were. And I still think they're a couple years away, but kind of in that second tier. This to me is the most interesting argument right here, Tom, because again, listen, Bo Nix gets a lot of credit, he gets bashed. Is some of it deserved? Yes. I think two things can be true at once. I think Bo Nix can be a good player, but struggle with pocket awareness. And I think Auburn's offensive line has been bad since he's been there. And I think those two things go hand in hand. I think people try and put it in one corner or the other. I got Bryce Young at 3, and I got Bo Nix at 4, because Bryce has a ton more talent around him. Auburn's offensive line is going to struggle, especially at the tackle position. And they've got no wide receivers with any experience or elite ability that they've shown. Where do you kind of see Bryce Young? Let's just do this. Where do you see Bo Nix kind of in the scheme of things?
Well, I would disagree with where you got him slotted. Bo Nix, and that goes with the territory when you play the quarterback position. You're going to get more credit you deserve, and you're going to get more blame than you deserve.
Yep.
But Bo Nix has brought on a lot of that on his own. He's been what I call a yo-yo player. He's up one series, down the next, up one game, down the next, up one play, down the next. He hasn't had a steady rate of consistent productivity. And I think one of the main reasons why that is for all of his physical attributes, I don't know if he's an innately accurate passer.
Yeah.
And you can be as physically talented as anybody, but if you don't throw a catchable ball and you're not consistently accurate with ball placement, then you're not going to be a consistently productive. Whether it's Mike Bobo, whether it's Brian Harsin, whether this new offense that they've both kind of gone in on together to build around, hopefully, what are Bo Nix's strengths, and then working to mask what they feel his weaknesses are, that we can see an increase in productivity. But there's no doubt, he's been a 2-year starter in the SEC. They've lost some weapons. I think they've got a difference maker, like a Heisman Trophy candidate type talent. I don't know if statistically Tank Bigsby will be where they need him to be with the offense that they're going to play in. But there's no doubt Bo Nix he's got to up his game. He's got to prove that his production can be on par with his physical traits.
Yeah. Because, we watch him. You watch some of those plays and you're like, wow, man, he can do a lot of different things. But when I watch him, Tom, and it's almost like a pitcher, it seems to me like since he's been at Auburn, he cannot recreate the same throw over the same throwing motion or the balance. He's either throwing off his back foot or he's leaning one. It's like a pitcher that never throws from the same arm slot. You're not going to be able to command your stuff. It's just how it is. Because again, it's repetition. Do you think with this new offense with Mike Bobo and going under center and maybe actually throwing to the tight end and explaining to them it's okay to throw the check down or to throw the ball away, do you think Mike Bobo and Brian Harsin both being quarterback guys is kind of the perfect medicine to at least put Bo Nix in the best situation possible, and then he's got to do it? Coach can't play for you.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that both of those guys, and I like Brian Harsin's comments and sentiments. The offense is going to be. He's come out publicly and said, "Hey, it's not my offense. It's not Mike Bobo's offense. We've gotten in a room together and we've tried to devise this thing together." And really, what he's saying is, we don't want to try and stick a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
And you can coach. You're 100% correct. There's not a coach in America that has an ounce of eligibility left.
Yep.
So you can coach a guy, you can prep a guy, you can meet with him, you can go over the tape, carry things over to the practice field. At the end of the day, he's going to have to go out and he's going to have to do it. And he's going to have to consistently do it. So, Auburn's got talent on that roster. That's not a roster that is devoid of talent. There's going to be pieces of the puzzle around it that'll be very talented.
I agree. And there's some spots, and look, everybody has spots where they can improve, even Alabama, believe it or not. And I do, before we get to Bryce Young, because I think this is a very interesting conversation here with Tom Luginbill, I do got to give a shout out to our partners at Canon.com. Look, listen, if you got sunglasses you aren't happy with, or they keep breaking, or, the lenses aren't exactly what you want, you need to go to Canon.com. That's KANON.com. If you use the promo code CanonCast15, you save 15% off your pair of sunglasses. Listen, they're crafted by Italians. They're good. You're going to be able to see clear. They're optimized. They're unreal. They've got different frames, different styles. You just need to head over there. That's Canon.com. Use that promo, CanonCast15. Here with Tom Luginbill, sideline analyst for ESPN, talking a lot of quarterback play. And I want to continue that direction. Going down the list, I got JT Daniels 1, Matt Corral 2, Bryce Young 3 because the talent he has around him, Bo Nix 4. And before I get to the bottom of this list, Bryce Young. Listen, we know Alabama lost some offensive linemen. They signed maybe the greatest class of offensive linemen in the history of college football. A lot of them have early enrolled. J.C. Latham, you look at the Brockermeyers, go down the list. You look at the young guys they have at wide receiver outside of Mechie, obviously Slade Bolden. I love Latu at tight end. I think he's the guy that's going to make some plays for him. What do you see Bryce Young this year? Do you see him taking a couple games to get his feet wet? And do you see Bill O'Brien using his legs a lot more and making him stay in the pocket or running a bunch of sprint out? Just kind of how do you see Bryce Young this year?
Well, I think when you have to replace some of the production, we've all become accustomed to seeing Alabama kind of be plug-in, right? Mari Cooper leaves, all right, Calvin Ridley shows up. Calvin Ridley leaves, Jerry Jeudy shows up. Jerry Jeudy leaves, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle show up. So they're going to have guys. The difference is they may not have as much game playing experience with a large sample size around him, around Bryce Young, that is, as let's just say if Bryce Young had stepped in last year and been the starting quarterback. So I don't think it will be just Bryce Young that maybe takes a couple of days to get his feet wet. I think it's going to be the offense as a whole. I don't put too much stock into what you see in a spring game.
Me either.
It's the 15th practice of 15 practices. And the coaches are just wanting to get the hell out of there without having any injuries. But I think you could see that with Alabama, they're a work in progress in the offensive line. There is no question in my mind that you have to utilize Bryce Young's athleticism. Have things that get him out of the pocket. You got to have things where you have designed quarterback runs. Now, he's not very big, so you also want to protect him. He's when they say he's 6'1", he ain't even close to 6.
Not even close.
And so, and he's not thick-limbed and thick-hipped like Tua was. And so, I think you got to protect him a little bit. They're going to be really, really good on defense. I still think their personnel, maybe even though lacking in experience, will be superior to 99% of the opponents that they play, which will give them an edge while they are trying to kind of put things together.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated to see it. I think they'll have no problem with Miami. I want to see kind of how Miami looks from a roster standpoint once we get to that point, because this transfer portal, I mean, Tom, I think you'll agree with me. It's been wild. Either way, whatever you think about it, like it or not like it, it's wild, and it's going to change the perception, not really perception, but the personnel, obviously, of the teams that we see this fall. But looking down the rest of the list, it obviously gets interesting here. I've actually got Connor Bazelak from Missouri. I really, really like him. I got him at 5. I got Max Johnson from LSU at 6. I think he's going to win the job. I think the RPO game that Jake Peets wants to run there at LSU, I don't know if Brennan gives them that ability. Even though I like Miles Brennan, it just depends on what you want. How do you feel about Bazelak, and how do you feel about the battle between Max Johnson and Miles Brennan?
Well, I would agree with you on Bazelak. I think he's really, really good. I had LSU's spring game, and I can tell you right now, there's a wealth of options for LSU, and the staff hires and the changes that they made in the offseason, the connections that, Durante Jones, a new DC, brings, having coached along with Dave Aranda, who was the previous defensive coordinator, then Jake Peets, of course, with Joe Brady and the Carolina Panthers, and getting back to that philosophical identity of what they're going to be on offense. Mm-hmm. Now, people fail to realize, as bad as they were on defense a year ago, they're in that week game versus Missouri. All right. Miles Brennan goes down to a season-ending injury. At that time, Miles Brennan threw 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions in 3 games.
Yep.
All right. TJ Finley then comes into play, starts 5 games, didn't statistically wow you. I think off the top of my head, it was 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, but 5 starts nonetheless. Then you get Max Johnson comes in. He starts 2 games, beats Florida on the road, and by the way, threw 8 touchdowns and 1 interception in 2 games.
Yeah.
So you bring in Garrett Nussmeier, the number 4, who's a really exciting young freshman, early enrollee. There, in my estimation, you're going to have a battle between Miles Brennan and Max Johnson. You'll hopefully redshirt Garrett Nussmeier. TJ Finley will go. He'll be the odd man out. He'll be the guy that will go into the transfer portal. But do not kid yourself. All of those guys are really, really talented. And so, people, you don't think about it, you're like, wow, Max Johnson and Miles Brennan combined for 19 touchdown passes to just 4 interceptions last year. A lot of people wouldn't have known that. All they remember is LSU having an abysmal year coming off of a national championship and being horrendous on defense. But the quarterback play that played was actually pretty good. Yeah. And so, it'll be interesting to see how they're, in my opinion, they're the dark horse team to rise up and be a real problem for people. They return everybody in their offensive line, just about everybody in their defensive front four. They're going to have 2 corners back on the perimeter. Keishon Butte, a wealth of other young receivers are in the mix. They're going to be pretty good.
I agree with you 100%. I think LSU, very similar to Auburn, does better as the outsider. I really think they do better as the outsider coming in. It's kind of how it is. And it's funny, you talk about passes that people remember from LSU. Tom, I think the most remembered pass from the LSU season last year was not from a quarterback and wasn't even from a player on LSU's team. I think it was a Florida guy throwing the shoe. I think that was the most famous pass people remember last year during LSU season. I know Florida fans really wanted me to bring that up again. So there it is. It's kind of like the butt fumble. I don't think it ever goes away. But, I do got to ask you, because I got one more. I want to ask you one question about this NFL draft, but Emory Jones. I am not and I do not think he's a bad player. I think some people have misconstrued what I've been saying about Emory Jones, that I don't believe in him, therefore thinking he's a bad player. I just think he's different. I actually think he kind of fits Dan Mullen a little more than Kyle Trask does, to be honest with you, what he wants to do if you look at his past. But when you lose Kyle Pitts, you lose Kadarius Toney, you go down the list of the guys they lost. Now, if they don't have talent replacing them, I just see Florida taking a step back this year because I don't think Emory can throw them to big victories. I just don't.
Time will tell. I think the term you used was a very accurate one. He's just going to be different. And you're right. It's more of a Dak Prescott look. It's more of a Nick Fitzgerald look. Mm-hmm. Listen, this is the way I look. I haven't been around Dan Mullen enough and broadcasted so many of his games, whether he was at Florida or Mississippi State. I don't care what anybody says. If you're not going to put stock in Dan Mullen's ability to develop the quarterback position and to enhance it and get the most out of it, then you haven't been paying attention. So I would make an argument that finding the pieces of the puzzle around to complement him will be a bigger challenge than getting him to play well. They'll have him prepared, but the offense will be different. You're going to see far more designed quarterback run. You're going to see far more quarterback lead, quarterback counter, quarterback power. You'll have the RPO stuff going. And so I think it's premature right now to see how far along they're going to be in the passing game, to your point, for some of the people that we may not know yet that are going to emerge at the perimeter spots. Listen, you're not going to replace a Kyle Pitts. You don't do that. You come up with other ways to get production in a variety of different angles. But I think they'll be okay. They're too well coached. I mean, that's the thing. And I know that Dan Mullen, he kind of takes a lot of heat publicly and can put his foot in his mouth sometimes. But at the end of the day, the guy can coach, man, and he can evaluate players. And when you're evaluating players that other people aren't recruiting, and those players become all conference players, there's some proof in that pudding, man. Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, there's not a ton of coaches out there I would choose if, life or death, I had to pick a guy to pick a play call on 3rd and 4 or 4th and 4 and have to get it. Dan Mullen would be very, very high on that list. I think he does an unbelievable job of getting the running backs involved in the passing. They wheeled people to death last year. I never saw more wheels. It was like going into a Goodyear tire store, man. So many wheels were hitting there. But Tom, man, it's been great stuff. We just had the NFL draft. I know you got to run, but just some overall storylines from the draft. The Bears coming up to get Justin Fields at 11. Chicago actually making right decisions. I don't even know what to think about that. I had to walk outside and make sure there wasn't a comet headed or meteor headed toward the earth. But just what did you think about the draft? And were there a few storylines that stuck out to you? I thought it was interesting. I wasn't really shocked or blown away by anything that transpired. Maybe the Carolina selection going defense at 8. I really thought they'd go wide out there to get a weapon. They ended up doing that later on for Sam Darnold, but J.C. Horn's a difference maker. And listen, and tall, physical, man-to-man corners are not growing on trees. And, you look at the Trey Lance move at 3, and this is what I think San Francisco is how they're approaching this. Is Jimmy Garoppolo's problem hasn't been productivity. His problem is he can't stay healthy. Yeah. Jimmy Garoppolo has taken this team to a Super Bowl. But if you can't stay healthy, you can't help the football team. It's hard to sustain success as a roster if your quarterback's not there every week. But I look at this and I say, okay, if you can bank on Jimmy Garoppolo maintaining his health and you can get through this year, it's a little bit like what Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs did when they had Alex Smith and drafted Patrick Mahomes. You don't play with him right away. You develop him. You find out what he's all about throughout the course of the year. And then you put yourself in a position. And again, San Francisco, it's an if. Jimmy Garoppolo has a good year and he is healthy. Now all of a sudden you've got market value. You've got trade bait, just like Kansas City did with Alex Smith, and then you moved Trey Lance. So I kind of like the line of thinking. Is there some risk to it? Absolutely. But heck, there's risk and reward in every selection in the NFL draft. I mean, I tell people all the time, we're responsible in recruiting for evaluating 2,800 17-year-olds. And everybody wants every coach to be 100% right on all those kids. And you look at the player pool for the NFL draft of 500 guys, and guess what? They missed on the first round draft choice 50% of the time. And that's on a 22-year-old. So there are no perfect players. There is no crystal ball. You do the best you can with the information that you have. Try and make sure it's a right fit, locker room fit, chemistry fit, organizational fit, and then let the chips fall where they may.
I agree with you 100%. It's an inexact science when you're dealing with human beings, and it always will be. Tom Luginbill, unbelievable stuff, man. Got to get you back on here. I know the audience is going to love it. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media and where they can catch you doing your stuff, man, because the season's going to be here before we know it. You and I both know that.
Yeah. I just did North Dakota State and Houston in a
FCS.
Great ball game this past weekend. Love the FCS playoffs. At Tom Luginbill on Twitter, Tom Luginbill on Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, the usual. And then really, I don't think we've got much TV stuff going on until we start getting into the summer. So I'll be on the road from a player evaluation standpoint. We've got camps in Las Vegas and Los Angeles coming up this week with Under Armour. And obviously the recruiting side of things never ends.
Yeah, definitely, man. If you need a partner out there in Vegas, just let me know. I've never been need an excuse to go out there. But Tom, I really appreciate it, brother. Let's do this again, and please stay safe out there.
You bet, man. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys checking us out as well. Head to the jboyshow.com, get some merch, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. It's been another edition of the Jboy Show. The Jboy's gone.
The Jboy Show is produced by David Cohn, Technical Director Dave Hammock, Creative Director David Culbertson, Audio Engineer Feyzan Shareef, Production Assistants Blaine Crain and Kyle Orr, Executive Producers Jake Crain, Vince Thompson, Steve Chamberlain, and David Cohn. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, thejboyshow.com, for updates regarding our newest apparel and merch designs. Win the water cooler with the Jboy Show.